The question today, let's put some context into what we want to talk about. 365 days after, 1 year later, are you better off now than you were last year? And do you hope to be better off at this time next year? So that's the question we're asking ourselves. 1 year ago, there were promises, policies, and announcements. The first promise President Tinubu made was to increase GDP to $1 trillion in 8 years. Before then, our GDP was almost $400 billion. So actually to double it in 8 years. He removed petroleum subsidies. He unified exchange rates. He promised to overhaul the security infrastructure. You just heard that now. And he also promised to double the power generation, which was 5,000 megawatts then to 10,000 megawatts in a period of 5 years, which means he promised to increase power by 1,250 megawatts every year. And he also promised to bring inflation under control. These were the promises, these were the announcements, and these were the policies. Next. So the highlights of these policies and announcements were that major policy changes were announced in 2023, including the $1 trillion GDP goal. The time lag between policy announcements and efforts effect was a drag on outcomes. The unintended consequences are leading to social unrest. There's a cost of living crisis in Nigeria. The minimum wage negotiation will be a source of widespread conflict, and the wrong sequencing of reforms is taking its toll on output. Nigeria needs new borrowing to refinance existing obligations, and policy changes, institutional reform, and new borrowings will lead to positive and faster growth in the period 2025 to 2026. Next. Now, what are we seeing? The economic weakness is partly structural and mostly exogenous. Exogenous means from outside, but structural means fundamental. So what are the structural challenges? Rent-seeking market structure, energy crunch, 4,000 megawatts, regulatory bottlenecks, declining labor productivity, and demographic pressures, including urbanization. Exogenous shocks, COVID disruption after COVID, global supply chain disruption, political tension, high global interest rates. Transitory developments, cost of living crisis, wage agitation, and social unrest. Next, please. Now, what really happened? This is very important. What happened in the last 1 year? Before, we're growing at 2.91%. That was last year. After, we are now growing at 2.87. So our growth has actually declined by 0.04. Headline inflation was 22.41 last year when Bola Tinubu took office. It is now 33.69. So it has deteriorated by 11.28%. And this food inflation was 24.82. It is now 40.53. It has deteriorated by 15.71%. The exchange rate on May 29 last year was 765 in the parallel market, 765 naira to a dollar. Today it's at 1,520. It has lost essentially. It has more or less doubled, and it's gone down by 100%. Difference between parallel and official rate. The difference in May 29 last year between the parallel market and the official rate was 295 naira to a dollar. Today, because the official rate has been adjusted in the last 2 days, it is now, the difference is now 346 naira. So it has actually deteriorated. The price of diesel at this time last year was 840 naira a liter. Today it's 1,200. Don't forget, this diesel price had gone all the way to 1,700, but thanks to Dangote, they've brought it down to 1,200, and it's off by 43%. Petrol at the pump, PMS, was selling at 190, highly subsidized. Today it's 580, in most parts of the country, 617 naira. So the price of petrol has actually increased by 205%. But generally speaking, efforts were commendable, but outcome was average. Now let's go to oil production. We are producing 1.15 million barrels of oil a day. Last year, this time, we are now producing 1.28, which is a marginal increase of about 11%. Federal Allocation Committee was sharing 10.2, total FAC last year was 10.92 trillion. Guess what? Because subsidy removal and reduction, we now are sharing 14.39 trillion. So revenue accrued and revenue shared has increased by 31.78%. The deficit as a percentage of GDP was 4.21% of GDP, and now it's gone to 5.50% of GDP. One, because GDP has reduced, but revenue has increased, but it's a negative variable. Real positive interest rates, it was minus 4.55, and at this time last year, it is now minus 7.21. So it has deteriorated by 2.66%. Total external debt was $42.7 billion. Today, it is $42.5 billion, so it has improved a little bit. External debt per head, every Nigerian was owing $179 last year. They are now owing only $178 per head. The gross external reserves was $35 billion last year. It has dropped by 7% to $32 billion. The minimum wage as of last year was 30,000 naira per head, per man, per month, and now it's open to bargain. Next slide. So, economic impact and unintended consequences. This is the big picture. The gross fixed investment, which drives growth, was $154 billion last year. It is now down to $105 billion, down by 31%. The stock market capitalization, positive. It was 30 trillion naira at this time last year. Now it is up to 55 trillion naira, up by 83%. So stock market investors are making money. National savings as a percentage of GDP was 33% by this time last year, is down to 29%. Life expectancy at this time last year was 55.8. It has improved by about 3 months to 56.1. Ships awaiting berth at the ports in Nigeria were 12 at this time last year. They are now up to 15, so it has improved by 25%. And grid collapses were 12 times last year. That means the grid collapsed once every month, but this time it has collapsed only 5 times, so some improvement there. Next. So in general, we have the good, we have the bad, and we have the ugly. What is the good? Tax and other revenues have more than doubled. FAC increased to 14.39 trillion. Dangote refinery and other modular refineries have commenced operations. Forex backlog has been cleared. Credit rating upgraded to B. Outlook, oil production increased to 1.34, and international affairs have actually reduced. What is the bad? Nigeria used to be 32nd largest economy in the world. Today we are now 42. In Africa we're number 1, but now we are down to number 4. Inflation, which was at 24%, is now 33.69%. Our public debt has risen to 97 trillion. What is the ugly? Terrorist attacks continue. Power grid collapse is there. Exit of multinationals, e.g. Procter & Gamble, escalating cost of living, and there's a crisis there. This is food inflation, and you can see it here. It's rising, and driven by post-harvest losses, insecurity challenges, and poor storage. So this is bad news. So how does it affect you, where you're sitting down at home, and Ini and Jeffrey? 1, at this time last year, you bought a bag of rice for 35,000. Today, you're buying it at 80,000. It has increased by 129%. It actually got up to 95,000. Gari, very, very difficult. Gari was 28,000 a bag at this time last year. It is now 50,000. As a matter of fact, it crossed this and went back. Beans has become a major problem. Beans was 30,000 naira at this time last year. It is now 95,000. It's gone up by 217%. You need beans for protein. A loaf of bread at this time last year was 900 naira. It's now 1,600. And a tuber of yam was 2,000 naira at this time last year. It is now 10,500. And guess what? The big problem is tomatoes. Yeah. Tomatoes was 40,000 a bag at this time last year. It is now 150,000. Yeah,
but Mr. Rewane, we hear there's so many factors feeding to this, especially the tomatoes. There's the news of pests. It's a planting season, you know, and so, I mean, is it just the economy or the other things?
No,
I think you can.
I'm not done. This is evidence-based analysis. This is a fact.
Mr. Rewane, apparently we have a lot to talk about. Yes. We're racing against time, and we know you have a seat on the table.
Well, so let me just
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Next slide, please. There's a non-food basket. This is, you did the food basket.
Then the
Transport fare,
inflation.
Lagos to Abuja. At this time last year, it cost you 20,000 to go by night bus. Now it's 33,000, it's up 68%. Or Balende to Woronshoki, it was 300 naira this time last year, it's now 500, up 67%. Lagos to Abuja was 38,000 last year, this time, it's now 80K, 111%. And Lagos to London, thank God, is now dropped from 2.6 million to 1.4 million.
We say thanks to Airpeace for that.
Thanks, sir. And finally, so our ranking amongst African countries has actually declined. In other words, we used to be, our GDP growth is 2.98, and South Africa is 1.93. Kenya has 4%, Ghana has 3.8%. Inflation, we are 33, South Africa is 5%, Kenya is 5%, Ghana is 25%. GDP per head, that is our wealth.
Yeah.
Every Nigerian is worth only $1,111. Guess what? South Africa, every South African is worth $6,700. Kenya, $2,000. And Ghana, $2,200. We never in the past, we were always richer than Ghana. And now we are here. External reserves as percentage of GDP, the figures speak for themselves. So the picture is looking tough, but
yeah, so many things obviously feed into this.
Some light,
Mr.
Some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
I think we should bring in the other guest.
That's why I said Mr. Rewane has a seat on the table. He has questions to answer. We're going to look at those drivers, but